I'm Anne. This is Elizabeth Ann Reads, and welcome. Today I'm going to do a tag. This is the Alphabet Soup tag. A is for author. This was created by Sean the Bookmaniac, and I saw it on Amanda's channel, The Curly Reader. So I will link both of those videos below, so be sure and go check them out. But this is just a bunch of prompts that revolve around the letter A. So the first is A is for author. Pick a good book by an author whose first or last name starts with A. And I actually had more trouble finding that than I thought I would. And I almost went with Sarah Addison Allen because I've been reading her lately. But I didn't. I decided to go with Anne Bronte, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. I just read this for the first time earlier this year, and I loved it. I'd read Jane Eyre multiple times and Wuthering Heights multiple times, but I had never read Anne Bronte. And I'm so happy that I finally picked this up. It is so good. It's the story of Helen and her young son who move into Wildfell Hall, and just kind of a slightly mysterious past. You learn more about her and her, just what she's maybe hiding or avoiding. But she is such an incredible character. She is so intelligent and well-spoken, and I just love her so much, and I loved this book and will definitely be picking up more Anne Bronte in the future. Question number 2 is A is for, well, A. The last book that you read with the word A in the title. And that would be Like a Dream by Amber Crawley. This is a short little novella that I just read a couple weeks ago. It is a contemporary that follows 2 teenagers who are in love, and then they break up, and just kind of the repercussions of that. And more, not even so much about the repercussions, but just the processing of the emotions and just kind of dealing with this grief process. And I just thought it was really sweet. It's magical realism. And I just thought it was a very sweet book and would definitely recommend it. Prompt number 3 is A is for angry, a book that pissed you off. And there's a few different ways you could take this prompt, but I decided to go with Before We Were Yours by Lisa Wingate. I read this, I think, last year. And it's a good book, so that's not why it makes me angry. In fact, the fact that it is a good book is probably why it makes me angry. This is a historical fiction. The characters are fictitious, but the events are historical. And it follows this orphanage right after World War II, back east in Tennessee, I think. And these children this woman that runs the orphanage takes these children, basically kidnaps these children from their homes, and then sells them to wealthy families to make money. And it's awful. It's this woman, and again, this woman was a real person. These things actually happened. This woman was a vile, despicable, awful person. After I read this book, I wanted to find out a little bit more about her, and so I read about half an article, and then I was done. I did not want to give her any more of my time. She is just a horrific person. But this book follows these sisters that get taken, again, taken from their home, kidnapped basically, and then sold. And the ones that are harder to deal with or aren't as quick to be adopted because they're not as pretty, or have other needs or issues that come up, this woman will just let them starve and kill them off. And there's obviously some pretty big trigger warnings in this book. There's abuse and just awful things. But the fact that these things actually happened is awful. And that book really, really made me angry. Or just knowing about that period in history, or that event, just made me very, very angry. So I do recommend this book, but be aware going into it what you're getting yourself into. Okay, prompt number 4 is A is for awesome, a top read of recent years. And I'm going to go with the obvious answer, and that is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. If you've been watching my channel, you know I've gone on my Brandon Sanderson binge this year. Finally, I haven't read him up until the last 4 or 5 months. And it's just, it's like a whole new world has opened up once I started reading Brandon Sanderson. These are high fantasy. They're so good. It's such an interesting world, such an interesting magic system. The characters are so just wonderful and flawed and passionate, and they're just so, so good. And I'm looking forward to many more Brandon Sanderson books that I have not read yet. All right, question number 5 is A is for Aaah, and that is a book whose title includes at least 3 A's. And for this, I chose The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, which I think actually has 4 A's. Yeah, no, just 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, just 3. Still 3. It's by Kate DiCamillo. It's not an unknown book by her, but it's definitely lesser known than some of her other things. And I have not read all her books, but of the ones I've read, this is by far my favorite. It's a little bit heavier, a little bit kind of darker themes and more bittersweet. But it follows this tiny little porcelain rabbit here, whose name is Edward Tulane. And he gets lost, and just kind of his journey of self-discovery. He starts out as a very just kind of cocky and pretentious little porcelain rabbit, and he just learns a lot along the way, and it's such a good story. Again, very bittersweet, a little bit heavier, not necessarily for your young sensitive readers, but it's a really, really good book. All right, prompt number 6 is A is for annoying. And that is a character who drove you up the wall. And honestly, I really struggled with finding a character that just across the board annoyed me. A lot of characters can start out annoying, and then that's part of their character development. But I was actually really struggling, so I had to go to a couple different people and ask for ideas just to get ideas flowing. And first of all, shout out to Josie Pye from Anne of Green Gables, because that is the first person I thought of, and one of the first people that the 2 people I asked thought of. So obviously that's a good one, but that's not what I'm going to go with today. I decided to go with Mr. Poe from the series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. Mr. Poe is he's a banker, and he is kind of the children's guardian. It's his responsibility to find them a home. And so he, of course, puts them with Count Olaf in the first book, and then he continues to put them with different people, and he continues to be absolutely worthless. And I realize these books are supposed to be a little ridiculous. It's supposed to be kind of tongue-in-cheek, but he is the most worthless, useless, unhelpful, annoying character that I could think of. He does absolutely nothing to help these children who their lives are constantly in danger. They're constantly telling him things that he doesn't believe, and he thinks they're being silly, and he's just super, super annoying and worthless. So, Mr. Poe from series of All right, question 7 is A is for Ambivalent, a book you're still not sure how you feel about. I decided to go with The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making by Catherine M. Valente. I read this several years ago and I liked it, but wasn't like blown away by it when I read it. And it's just kind of sat on my shelf because I've been undecided whether I want to continue on with the series or not. So I think hopefully in the next few months I'm going to reread this and then decide if I want to continue on with the series or not. I'm just, it says ambivalent. I'm just not sure how I feel about it, or if it's worth it to me to continue on or not. All right, question 8. A is for anticipation. A book, new release or not, that you're very much looking forward to reading. There's a lot of books that I'm looking forward to reading, but I decided I am going to go with the new release, and there's actually 3 new releases that I'm looking forward to this fall. But the main one is actually The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. She's the writer of The Night Circus. So I'm really curious to see what else she comes up with. Hopefully it's not a, slumpy second book like sometimes happens. I'm looking forward to it. It sounds interesting. I'm hoping it holds up. I'm also really looking forward to the sequel to Skyward by Brandon Sanderson, as well as the final installment in the trilogy, the Scythe trilogy by Neil Shusterman. That's called The Toll, and that's also coming out. I think all 3 of those come out in November, I'm pretty sure. All right, question 9. A is for Actually. And this is a book you didn't expect to like, but you actually did. I really hesitated with this one because when I read that prompt, I immediately had a book pop into my head. But this is a book that I never intended to talk about on my channel for a variety of reasons. And I kind of tried to come up with another answer, and I just kept coming back to this one. So we're going to talk about it, and maybe someday I'll do a video about all the books that I never intended to talk about on my channel because this would be at the top of the list. Okay, so that is Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. This was written in 1955, and it has quite a history as a banned book. I never, ever, ever intended to pick up this book, but it was required reading for one of the literature classes I took at college, so I read it when I was in college. For those of you that are completely unfamiliar with Lolita and why I'm talking about it so strangely, Lolita is the story of a pedophile, basically, to put it simply. It is about a man who marries a woman because he is in love with her daughter, and it's about the relationship that he has with her daughter. Now, it's not full of like gratuitous details or anything like that. It's just overall a disturbing subject. And this is a book, even though I liked this book a lot, it is not a book I recommend to people for kind of obvious reasons. But all that being said, and my disclaimer of I don't necessarily think you should go pick up this book, this is probably one of the most memorable reading experiences of my life. Vladimir Nabokov is a genius. The way he writes is stunning. His use of language, just the way he puts words together and the thoughts that he manages to find language for is just stunning. His wit is incredibly sharp and subtle and snarky, and it's just, oh, it's such an amazing, amazing book to read. Again, if you decide that you're willing to take on something like this, because it is a heavy book. I'm not going to like sugarcoat that. It's a disturbing book. But if it is something you decide you're interested in, just know that for me, the beauty of this book is in the writing. It is just, I feel like I'm using the same words, but it's just breathtakingly stunning. His use of words. I need to reread this book. I need to read more by Nabokov. Yeah, I love this book. I think it's so good. And again, I don't necessarily recommend that you go pick it up, but I love this book so much more than I ever thought I would. All right, question 9 is A is for affected. A character, book, or writer you feel is pretentious. First of all, Humbert Humbert, who is the protagonist from Lolita, was definitely on the list of pretentious characters. But in the end, I decided to go with Dorian Gray from The Picture of Dorian Gray. This is a man who is very handsome and has everything going for him in life until he kind of realizes that he has everything going for him in life and becomes a complete jerk and is arrogant and unkind and just a nasty overall person. Again, I think this is a fantastic book. I think he's a fascinating character, but so pretentious. All right, question 11 is A is for how's it going, eh? And that is a book you liked by a Canadian writer or one that you want to read. So I was doing a little looking, and I have not read much by Canadian writers. I was trying to avoid the kind of obvious answer to this question, but I'm not. I'm just going to go for it. So my answer is, of course, Lucy Maud Montgomery, but I am not going to go with Anne of Green Gables, even though that's a fantastic book. I'm going to talk about her Emily series. This is a trilogy: Emily of New Moon, Emily Climbs, and Emily's Quest. And these, in some ways, are a lot like the Anne books. It follows an orphan who goes to live with relatives, and just, it's her coming-of-age story. Emily is a bit darker than Anne. They're more melancholic. She doesn't have that same hopeful spunk that Anne has, which in some ways makes me like these books more than the Anne books. Some days. Some days I like Anne better. Some days I like Emily better. They're all fantastic. But yeah, more people need to be familiar with the Emily trilogy. They're so good. They're great fall reading. I think I'm actually going to reread them this fall. Sitting by a fire. It's going to be nice. But you should definitely, if you haven't read Emily, you should definitely pick up Emily of New Moon. And question 12 is A is for anticlimactic, a book that you thought fizzled out at the end. For that, I'm going to go with Where'd You Go, Bernadette? I read this earlier this year and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the characters. I thought they were very funny. Again, I appreciate that kind of snarky humor. And the first half of the book, I think I read in a day, or the first 3/4 of the book I read in a day. And then the last bit just took me like 3 or 4 days to get through. It just seemed to lose all its momentum. And just, like, overall, it's still a good book. It just lost me at the end. I didn't like the ending. I thought it was, anticlimactic. I thought it was just a boring, after how good and enjoyable I thought the book was, the ending just kind of fell flat. All right, and 13 is A is for all the booktubers. Tag a bunch of people. I don't know who's been tagged. I don't know who all has done this. So if you are watching this and you have not done this, I tag you. If you have an active channel, you watch this video, and you have not done this tag, you're it. Be sure, if you do this tag, or if you've done it already, link the video in the comments below so I can come watch and check out your answers. And if you don't have an active channel, feel free to answer some of the questions below because I would love to hear. As always, thank you for watching, and I will talk to you soon.